This episode goes a little bit deeper into my experience with psychedelics and plant medicine. Only this time I have my husband joining us. And I have him on the show because his work has far surpassed mine. He is the person that introduced me to this kind of work. And the way that he describes what psychedelics and plant medicines are and can do for us is far more articulate and beautiful than I could have come up with myself. So I hope that you'll give this episode a listen and that maybe you will learn something. And just a quick note, anything that you hear in this episode is our individual experience. This is not meant to be construed as medical or mental health advice. And you do you, you make choices for what works best for you. We are simply here to inform. So enjoy the show. Welcome to When Does It Get Good? I'm Zovig Garboushian. I'm your host. And today is an unofficial part 2 to a previous episode that I did about my work with psychedelics and plant medicine. That episode, if you haven't listened to it, go back and check it out. It's episode 8 called My Work with Psychedelics and Plant Medicine. But today I'm really excited, and I really mean that, because I'm here with my husband. And we are going to talk about our experiences with psychedelics and plant medicine. So before we start, before I introduce him, I just want to offer a disclaimer. Anything that we talk about today is from our own experiences, our own points of view, and should not be taken for medical or mental health advice. It should not be construed as suggestion or any directives. This is strictly our experience. And as always, you do you, your choices are yours and yours only. We are simply here to inform. With that being said, Stephen, hi babe, how you doing?
Hi, babe. How are you?
I'm good. So, Stephen, I'm sure that people listening would want to hear a little bit about you. So I'd love it if you could just tell our listeners just a little bit about who you are.
Hi, everybody. My name is Stephen Bourne, also known as Mr. Garboushian. And I've been married to Zovig for almost 4 years now. And is that right? No, 3.
Three and change.
Yeah. 3 and change. So, no, that's right. Almost 4.
Okay.
And we have formed a really good partnership, and I'm excited to be here today and help her talk about this. I have had my own journey, and we'll get to that. My day job is an architect. I have my own practice, and I also own a pizza shop. So if anybody likes deep dish pizza in West Seattle, come out and see West of Chicago Pizza Company. A little plug right there.
Yeah, and it's a shameless plug, and I'm cool with it because the pizza is delicious. Okay, so let's dive in. So the first thing I want to ask you, when it comes to psychedelics and plant medicines, you've had a much broader experience than I have. You've been doing this for a lot longer than I have. But I'm curious if you could just share what got you into this kind of work. Where did that start for you?
So it started in 2008, and I had been divorced for a couple years from my first marriage, and it was very difficult and toxic. And I had started therapy during the separation, and then that was just individual work. And then I went to a group work about the time or a little bit after we finalized the divorce. So I was in a group session already, and then I found I was looking for community, which that group didn't really offer. And one of my clients was working with a teacher at the time, and I got hired to do a job down in Portland. And he and I got in a with and drove the whole day down to Portland and back. And we spent most of the day talking about life and our journeys and how to deal with these things. And he was talking about this teacher and invited me. At that time, it was like January of 2008. And he invited me to a session in like April or May or something I couldn't make. I kept putting it off. And finally, I committed to doing my first official seminar with my teacher that I was with for a few years, a guy named Carlos, in the end of July of 2008. And we did a 5-day seminar with this teacher, but we didn't do any psychedelics or plant medicines. It was just getting to know ourselves, but it put the foundation down for me to understand what the next step was in understanding myself. And then at Labor Day of that year, so like a month later or so, no more, we were in Honolulu at another seminar, which was the first one I took was a special thing that you only take once, but everything else is just a standard seminar that I went to. And I went out with about 15 other people or 18 other people, I think, something like that. I think we had 18 in the group. And it was a 4 or 5 day seminar. And the third day or fourth, I think it was the third day, we did special work. And that's what we called it in that group. And I don't know, I put a lot of trust in my teacher and accepted that I just needed to surrender to the process. I believe I had something like MDMA or some relative of that because it was very mild. It was very easy. It was very gentle. I've always avoided it. I had never done anything hard in my life as far as drugs. I had marijuana quite a bit, and I had never run into anything really harder than that. So I didn't have any context. And I also didn't have a party attitude toward it. I had a lot of fear, frankly, in the beginning. I was scared of it, not sure what would happen, but I was in a safe place, I felt. And I started with people who were very caring and loving, who I had already been through a lot with and knew pretty well. And over the period of the next year and a half, I worked into several different modes of plant medicines. I know for sure, I believe I had, and this was the teacher Carlos, who's also an MD and psychiatrist, and so he has access and has his own formulas for a lot of these things. So again, I didn't always know what I had, but looking back now, I can tell that I probably had psilocybin or some portion of that at some point. I think I had ketamine at that period at one point or another. And what it did was, we didn't do this in a vacuum, of course. We always were doing it in group work. Every seminar was 4 to 5 days. We'd sit and we'd learn and we'd do meditations and get instructions from Carlos, and we have to do our own writing and working. And then we would have the special work. And then we would have another day of integration where we talk about what we learned and why and what we we're going to do with it. And each one of these experiences from that very first one in Honolulu forward, I came out just at another level, increasingly powerful in my own understanding of myself and in my healing process. Because honestly, I was depressed and had been for years and had gone through a very difficult relationship that I didn't know how to heal myself. And I didn't have healing capacities before that. I didn't know how to heal myself until I got separated. I had never done therapy for any substantial length of time. I didn't have any commitment to myself or my work as a growing human being or evolving human being or anything like that. So that's how I got into it. But then it all stopped with Carlos for a little while. But the core group that I was with kept going, and we kept doing our own work, and we kept doing it was that same group of people that I felt safe with. We were doing weekly meditations, and once a month or once every other month, we would get together and do special work.
Okay.
And so that was kind of like my introduction, and it got me out of my victimhood. It got me out of my self-loathing and feelings. It wasn't so much that I loathed myself as I felt I was never worthy enough. I was never good enough for anything. I was always trying to get validation from every relationship, every work, everything I was in. I was like, am I good enough? Am I good enough? Am I good enough? And one of the exercises that I had to do in that first year while I was on special work, Carlos gave me an assignment. I had to sit and say, I love myself for like 30 minutes. And I had just chant that. And I had to learn what that felt like it opened up something inside of me while I was on that medicine, of course. And you start to commit to those things, and that medicine just brings it out, and you start to feel it innately, intrinsically, what you're supposed to feel as a human, like how good we are and how amazing we are, instead of all the crap that we're fed. So it just like cleared that slate and allowed me to start to appreciate. And I say start because it's a journey. It's never a destination, but it started me on the path of being more in myself and more confident about what I can do and who I was, and I knew then that I wanted community.
You said a lot of things I want to kind of dig into a little bit. You used the word, you said at the beginning, you had fear around this kind of work. And I think, well, actually, let me back up for a second, because you mentioned a couple of terms I want to make sure people are familiar with. So you said the first journey that you did was with MDMA. For those of you who aren't aware, MDMA is what people will call Molly or ecstasy. It is ultimately the work of that is really about opening your heart. It is about understanding love for both yourself, love for your surroundings, love for the people around you. Everyone's experience on these medicines is different, but primarily MDMA opens up your heart. And then you also mentioned psilocybin, which is, for anyone who doesn't know, it's mushrooms. There are many different kinds. There are many different forms of mushrooms, but essentially psilocybin is the name for that category of plant medicine, mushrooms. So I just wanted to inform people of that. But you did say, when you were first introduced to this as a potential idea for you, there was fear around it and you had to learn to surrender. So, I came to this work through you. And previously, in my previous life, pre-Stephen, PS, hearing about psychedelics and plant medicine, it felt a little scary to me because it was always presented to me like a party drug. It was something that you took, and then you went out and you went and partied. You were with a bunch of people. It was very high energy. And it always felt like it was being described to me as an escape. And I was adamantly against escaping myself and facing what I needed to face, whether that be through therapy or through whatever modality I was into, because I've done them all. And so when you brought it to my attention, there seemed to be such a reverence and respect that with which you presented it to me. And so I just wonder if you could share a little bit about you noticing that you had fear about it and what it was that made you decide to surrender and give it a try. What was that?
Yeah, so the fear was about not knowing what would happen and losing control. And I've never been a partier like that. I didn't get into that scene in any way in any of my younger years before that. So I didn't have a context of what that felt like to take that kind of medicine. And so the fear was also like, I think it was that core fear that I felt all the time. Like, am I going to be okay? Am I going to be loved? Am I going to be good enough if I do this? Am I going to be accepted? And that wasn't, I mean, on the other side now, it's ridiculous questions, but I had to go through that. And I think a lot of people do in that fear moment of what is the fear about? And a lot of it's fear of looking bad or doing something stupid, but also fear of what is this going to do to me? Is it going to change me? And is it, am I gonna be weird or any, there are all kinds of fears that come up about that. And I'm sure I had a lot of them at the time. That was a long time ago now, so I don't remember precisely, but I do remember feeling a lot of trepidation, but it was with people, so it was okay. The impetus to surrender, that came from basically getting, I might say, to the bottom of the trough. Like, I bottomed out after the divorce, and I was so depressed that, I started to realize in the therapy that I had depression. That was the first time I had started to realize it. And it wasn't really at the forefront of everything, but I realized I had issues, and I was feeling a little broken. And I wanted to heal. And I've always, look, I did Boy Scouts when I was in my high school and junior high. I surrendered to a program then. So it's part of my nature to go, okay, what can you teach me if I go do this and surrender myself for a while to this program? And I go and do their things and I follow their program and I learn what I can learn. And then eventually I grow out of it. And I did that with Boy Scouts and I did that with this work. And I keep growing through each process to the point where I'm like, okay, I think this is enough here and I can let this go. And that was another lesson I had to do, was letting things go in my life that were no longer, either didn't serve me at all or no longer were serving. And that's part of surrender too, I think, is learning to let go of those things that we've been holding on to that we feel are so integral to who we are, but aren't really. They're just things that we've held on to and programs that we've assumed or been given based on past things or just erroneous understandings of ourselves, really. And the surrender part of it is critical. You can't really grow and learn about yourself until you surrender your preconceptions about yourself. And the plant medicines help that. The plant medicines take your ego away and really allow a true self to come through and you to express yourself truly without all the boundaries and feelings of oh, am I going to be laughed at? Or I'm going to look stupid. You just say your truth in that moment, because that's that's the only thing that matters in that moment. So, and I'd also like to speak about the sacredness. Yeah, I didn't really address that when I first talked, but I came to this, fortunately, through a pathway that was imbued with sacredness. I was never, ever allowed to be irreverent or uh, disrespectful in any way in those contexts. And it was very easy to shift into that. But it took a moment, just one moment of, oh, okay, I understand now. This is special. That's why we call it special work. It's special. It's not something that you would take in a crowd of people that weren't all on the same page, right? You need to have the safe setting, the safe context, and things like setting, and intention, which you may have already talked about, babe, and your other one. So people may already
Yes.
know about that.
Yeah.
So setting, and intention are part of the sacredness of every journey. And that's what I was taught, and that's what I took on, and that's what I taught other people, because I then later on started bringing other people into this work and doing group work in my own house this way, and that's what I taught other people, and it's always been like that. I've never done it recreationally.
Yeah. I want to go back to something that I think is really important, and I think probably a lot of people can relate to, is this idea of control. And your fear was based in, what if I lose control, and how will I look, and what will people think, and will I look ridiculous, and all of those things. So, I mean, in my work as a coach, control comes up a lot, right? It has come up for me in my work. Part of me not wanting to even smoke weed back in the day, and I still don't because it's not for me, but like even in my 20s and 30s was because I felt like I was losing myself. And so I hear a lot about, what will come out, and what if I don't come back me, and what if it changes me, and what if. And the part about surrender, in fact, I want to share this little tidbit. The first journey I did with you was an MDMA journey. So again, a sort of a soft entry. But I remember taking the medicine, and then you told me to now we just sit and wait. And I remember thinking, what the hell am I waiting for? And you like wrapped yourself up in a blanket and you lay down and you just closed your eyes. And I thought, well, he's just going to fall asleep and I'm going to be by myself. And what am I supposed to be doing here? And what is it? What am I doing? What am I going to do? What do I have to do? It was all about that. And I had no understanding of what it meant to surrender, to just allowing it to occur and trusting that I was in a place that I would be safe. I mean, you created a safe space. You taught me how to be very respectful, set your intention, don't clutter your head with social media and garbage during the day. Don't overeat before you do it, all those things, right? But I remember being mad which is so ironic because we're taking MDMA, which is all about heart and love. And I remember being mad because I knew that was it. I had ingested it, and it meant surrender for me, which meant not knowing what would happen and not knowing what would show up. And the other piece that I look back on now is that I was scared of being visible, that you would see me, because that's what we all fear, being seen, right? Oh my God, they're going to see me. And what if they don't like what they see? And what if all the bad things I think about myself are true and then they affirm it? And what I love about this kind of work, doesn't really matter what medicine you take, it helps that fear drop away so that I can be my truest form. And that part of me can come out unabashed, unleashed, and unedited.
I think it's important here to distinguish between self and ego.
Okay.
Because the ego is what can't exist in the present moment. The ego has to exist in the future or the past, has to be it's the voice that's talking about what you just did or what you're going to do. The ego in the moment can't be, because it needs something to reflect and has to focus and churn on something. So medicine, plant medicine, spirit molecule, however journey you take, takes that ego and it just pushes it aside and lets it sit there in service without having to go into the future or go into the past to evaluate, criticize, judge, or whatever else your ego is going to be doing at normal. And we all do that. But in this moment, all that you're looking for is your true self, not your ego. And we have to distinguish between those things, because if you've I hear you all the time talking about how we are not our thoughts, we are not our emotions. that we are also not our ego. And our ego will do a lot of things to make it justify its existence and make us worry or make us fear and make us or be overly joyed or overly excited. I mean, it can go both directions on the spectrum. But the point of the medicine is that it pushes it out of the way. It dissolves the ego for a momentary period where you can just be yourself and see the world without the context of all of the other stuff that you have to sort and filter and do every day. And I think that's really important, is that the fear and the things that we feel going into a journey are from the ego. They're not from the self. They're just the ego fearing its exposure, because it's going to be exposed and it's going to be visible, and it can't exist in that way, in the same way it does when we're not under those influences.
Yeah. Yeah. The surrender part for me was that I didn't know everything. Mostly that I didn't know everything about myself. I think that was the biggest part, the hardest part for me, at least at the beginning. Now I actually really like revel in the, oh, what am I going to get revealed this time? What will I understand? What will I learn this time? It's actually really exciting for me. But, you know, through the first, I've been doing this work with you for 5 years, 5 and change. And we together have done MDMA and psilocybin and LSD, all very different medicines, all have different purposes. You all provide different individualized experiences. At the beginning, it was kind of scary, and like it felt, you know, like I was on a roller coaster and I didn't have my harness on and I wasn't strapped in. And I think the challenging part for me, I would realize after, was, oh, I have to let go of all the things I believe to be true about myself. All these stories about who I thought I was, that protect me, that have gotten me, you know, fair amounts of success and have gotten me far enough in my life that like, it looks like everything's great. And I'm by no means am I saying things are not great. Like, things are great. And if I had continued on that path, they would have continued to be great. But they were not the depth and the expansiveness that I actually have, or you, or anybody that does this work. Like, we just scratch the surface about who we are. And I find that when we have to challenge what we believe to be true about ourselves, I'm a this, I'm a that, and put all these labels and identities on it, it can be like, well, who am I if I'm not this? Who am I if I'm not the consummate doer? Who am I if I'm not the person that makes it all better for everybody, or the hero, or the whatever? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Oh, yeah. In fact, that very first regular seminar I attended in Honolulu in September of 2008, after the initiation, one of the exercises that we had to do, we had to sit facing each other, knee to knee, 9 people facing each other, so 2 rows of 9, and then one person, we had a stopwatch of 5 minutes, and the one row was the facilitator, and the other row was the answerer, the subject, and the facilitator, all their job was to ask the same question over and over again. And we had to do that for 5 minutes, and then we switched seats one over. We moved one seat to the left and did it again. So we met everybody in the whole row, 18 times. That question was, who are you? We had to answer that question over and over again for an hour and a half. It just breaks down. It broke down. Prior to going to the special work, it broke down and made me realize these are all just labels that I attach to myself when I'm functioning in certain ways. And this is part of the lesson of that seminar was, you are not what you do. And that was a big, big deal for me at the time, because I had defined my entire existence about what I did and not who I was. Right? I had no value in who I was. All my value was what I did, how I did things, how well I worked, how good of a worker I was, or whatever, how good of an architect I was. Those were how I defined my worth. And that exercise then leading into this heart-opening medicine showed me that I am none of those things. I am none of those things. Those are just things that I function as. And it was such a core lesson really early on in my journey, because it allowed me to separate and detach my experience internally from my experience externally. And like really start to distinguish that I am worthy even as I am, because that was part of the lesson, is that you are all these things. I'm an architect, I'm a father, I'm this, I'm that, I'm a fisherman, whatever. But that's just a function that I go do, and I enjoy or don't enjoy or good at or don't good at it, but it doesn't change who I am inside one bit. And that was like, for anybody out there who struggles with self-worth or feels like they're not enough, that comes from doing your definition of self, because you are trying to do in order to be worthy so that you can be something worthy. And it's the other way around. First of all, and this is what this whole thing has taught me, is that we be first, we be ourselves first. Then we can go from that place out to do things that are in alignment with our service and our mission and our purpose to being here. And out of that, then we have worth. That is our worth in the world. It's not the reverse direction. The things we do in the world do not give us worth. We have worth that we then give to the world. So it was a big lesson for me to understand that contextually in all the things that I had been doing in my life. And at that time, I was 39 years old. I was 39 years old when I was learning these lessons. So really late in life. I mean, I was learning them. I was almost 40 years old and I'm learning this stuff. So, I would encourage anyone to engage in this process as early as they can in life, as in the adult life. It makes a big difference. You can avoid a lot of suffering.
Do you recall what came out of that exercise for you?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of described it right there. Like, my answers were things like, and at the time, of course, I had somewhat of an architecture practice. It was fledgling. Was a licensed architect. I had a son, so I was a father. And you have to answer that. And over a period of 90 minutes of answering the same question over and over again, you start to run out of things to say.
So where did you get after you started
got to the
running out?
point where you start to realize that, like, if you say the same word over and over again, it loses its structure and its meaning to you. It's the same thing. You've assigned that a label so many times it starts to lose its meaning, and you start to see that it just dissolves. And there's something else there. There's something else of me that goes beyond architect or father or fisherman. And I exist before any of those things. And my existence is not dependent, and my worthiness is not dependent in that existence on what I do. It's just dependent on me showing up as me. And that was, I hadn't ever been given those gifts before. And it was a really big deal at the time to be given those gifts. And I changed. Look, I feel, and this is my own opinion, but I feel that any plant medicine with a correct intention changes your DNA for the positive. Your perception and your consciousness change our world. And if given the right tools and the right perception, you can alter your own frequency of how you vibrate. And that's what DNA is. It's a frequency of how we vibrate. And this is my own opinion on stuff, but I feel like I changed in those months tremendously. My frequency of vibration changed. Didn't stop changing, and it wasn't a finished product, but it got me out of that super low, victim-y, depressed vibration of I'm not worthy for anything in this world, and I need to earn my way every day to I have something to give.
Earn my way and have to give something. I mean, if I had a nickel for every time that shows up in my coaching with my clients, if I had a nickel for every time that's shown up with me in my own work, I'd be a very rich woman. I have to earn my way and prove that I'm supposed to be here and offer something and give something and be what this situation or this person needs in order to be worthy, in order to belong here. And I would say that has been foundational learning for me with this kind of work with psychedelics and plant medicine, truly about my worth. There is and I've talked to you about him, but I've done a lot of studying under someone named Robert Ellis, who is an incredible coach who has a body of work called Coaching from Essence. And he uses a foundational principle of essence. And essence is your natural way of showing up in the world that adds value without you having to try. And it sounds to me like that's what you are talking about. It's not what you do. It's not your personality. It's not your motivation or your passions. It's not your coping mechanisms or your tendencies or your skill set. It's simply who you be, who you are. And it shows up wherever you are, regardless of the circumstance, the job, the location, the relationship. It's simply there. But we can get so detached from it very early on because look, we live in a world of conformity and look same and do things that are acceptable and follow the rules. And, so when I was a kid, my chatterbox self and wanting to communicate and connect and like pull the layers back. And why are we doing this? What is this about? What is the truth here? That sort of truth seeker in me was quieted because it was inconvenient. But that's part of my essence, is showing up in a way that's trying to look through things to see what's really going on and to crack stuff open. And so far as I can tell, without putting a label on it, that is part of my essence. And it's the part of me I've gotten closer to in doing this work, and not trying to temper it or apologize for it, and simply just being it. And it is effortless for me. And when I talk about this, understanding who you are, not who you be, the way you said it, when that shows up in coaching and in my work, and again, in everything I say about my coaching and my clients, I have my own work into. When I talk about that, it's such a challenging concept for people to understand, because we have this thick layer of I am what I do, and I am what I prove. And I am the act that I put on and the labels that have been put on me. And peeling that back, I think, is some of the most important work that we do, because then you can go do anything. Then you're free to do whatever it is, and you're free to experiment, and you're free to fail, because you know what you actually are.
That's a good one. Free to fail. That I never was comfortable with anything less than practical, perfection before that. And now I'm like, yeah, I fail a lot, and I get back up and keep going. And I'm sure you've seen me do that in many of my business endeavors and stuff like that. And personally, I just, okay, it didn't work. It's not a referendum on me or my worthiness. That just didn't work. Just go do it again. Find out what you learned or didn't know. So, and yeah, that was a big thing too. Every failure is not an indictment on your worthiness or yourself or why you're here. It's just another lesson.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I'd love to just talk a little bit about a few of the different medicines that you and I have experienced together. Again, my experience has been limited compared to yours. You've done, ayahuasca, you've done ketamine, you've done many different things. My portfolio, if you will, has been MDMA, psilocybin, and LSD. And for me, MDMA at this point is, I think when you and I do this together, it actually, it's a relationship strengthener.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Because you and I are then able to talk about stuff and share things about ourselves and with each other that might, under normal circumstances, trigger something or upset somebody, or, just be a whole dramatic thing. But we can actually laugh about it. So I get pretty chatterboxy with you when we're doing MDMA, because I want to discover you and understand you. And I want you to discover me and understand me. But maybe you could just talk a little bit about, from your experience, babe, what the MDMA experience has been like for us.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
So, for me, I always did any medicine, MDMA included, with a larger group or by myself. I only did a couple of solo journeys, but generally it wasn't a one-on-one thing in my experience. And so when we got together and started becoming a relationship and a partnership, and I wanted to introduce you to this, and you were open to this, of course, that's the first place I go, because I know, one, I'm really comfortable in it. I'm complete, it's the one thing probably that induces the least amount of anxiety going into a journey today in my current state. I don't have much anxiety about MDMA, and I feel very comfortable leading or having someone come with me and join me on that journey and bring them along. And so it was very comfortable for me. Our experiences initially were great because, one, I saw you get over your fear, and I didn't expect you not to have fear, but I saw you overcome it very quickly and get into it. And then our connection, even today, after all these years, there are things sometimes that we talk about that create, as you said, a reaction or a trigger, or maybe just are uncomfortable. They're just a little embarrassing or a little awkward in a relationship between a man and a woman, or two other people, man and man or woman and woman. If you have relationships with an intimate other, there are places in you that can be scary to go. Our journeys have allowed us to get to those places very quickly and very safely. Like, our egos aren't involved, so there's not the danger of hurting or being hurt in those situations. We can say what we need to, and we are confident in where we are, and we speak outwardly, and the other person, you and or me and whoever, the receiver, can be in the receiving place completely at peace and accepting without judgment what's coming in. And those are hard things to do in the daily world when our ego's involved fully, because our ego's got all kinds of judgment running, and we have our own history of our own lives that we bring forward with us into this moment. And it's often difficult to identify each and every preconceived notion, judgment that we hold, and bias that's inherent in us from all of our issues in the past in that moment without being on the medicine. The medicine allows us to move that aside, and all of those things that we still are trying to process out of us are gone, and we can just speak to heart. It literally is like pure soul to pure soul. There is no ego involved. And the longer we do this, the more deeper we get, the more involved we get in these conversations. We've definitely gone over so much ground in such a shorter period of time than I think without the medicine we would have. It's not that you can't do these things without the medicine. It's just, it's a lot harder. It takes way longer, and you have to be so diligent about watching your own ego. The medicine helps you in that regard to open the doorway to true self. It doesn't do any of the work for you. You still have to walk through the door, but it's there. It's open. And the ego isn't going to be slamming it shut on you every time with judgment and all the preconceived, all that stuff that ego needs to churn with, that we carry with us, and those voices in our head that everybody has. We all have those voices that talk to us. That's our ego rehashing or projecting. And that goes away, and there's just this big giant heart space that opens up in MDMA. You can connect with the earth, sky, the whole planet. I mean, after all this work, I consider myself a citizen of the planet first and foremost. I mean, I'm so connected to what's around me. And it obviously you've seen me, it gets me choked up from time to time in that regard, but that's what happens when you have an open heart and you're willing to be empathetic to everything on the planet and realize that we're all connected and this is all a system. And that MDMA medicine is crucial to allowing that heart to open up and be available to all of humanity and the planet and everything.
Yeah. I can't add anything to what you said. You said it more beautifully than I could have said myself. And you said connecting heart to heart and soul to soul. And I think that we use words because we don't have anything else,
Yeah.
but ultimately it is a heart to heart, soul to soul. I see you connection. Yeah. And, part of my work, and I think this has been part of your work too on MDMA, even now with you, now that I'm at a place where I'm confident enough to be in a different room than you, I don't need to be constantly talking to you. My work on MDMA is about opening my heart to myself. What does self-love look like when things aren't going great, when I'm not at my best, when I am failing at something, or I feel embarrassed or like I'm less than, how do I love myself in those moments? Because it's very easy to love ourselves when we're doing great. So easy. I'm like, yeah, I'm the best. I'm rocking it. I'm winning. But when I'm feeling low, when my business is not doing great, or I have doubt about something, or I messed up with a client or something like that, or with you for that matter, if I've said or done something with you that was just the wrong move, being able to have grace and compassion and empathy for myself is so big. And that allows me to move through those moments that much faster, that much more fluid, and with less injury.
Oh
right?
yeah, absolutely. Less angst and less just self-recriminations. And I would say that generally, just without exception, pretty much everybody on the planet can learn to love themselves better. And this world would be a better place if we all loved ourselves a little better.
Yeah. Um, the other work that we've done is psilocybin, mushrooms. So I talked about this in the first episode I did, where it was just my experience. Go back and listen if you haven't listened to it. But mushrooms, because they grow in the earth, they're from the earth, they're a plant medicine. They are an experience that gets me back to myself, like foundational, who I am and how I'm connected to everything around me. Right. So that's where my connection has really been reinforced, is through that work. And I haven't done as much of that as I would like to, but we've done a handful of those journeys together. And those journeys for me have been, I have faced the absurdity of the things that I think are big deal, because I have been able to see how big I actually am, how connected I am, how much, not just value I bring, but how much I'm able to offer this world in this lifetime through this body, and, through my work as a coach and a trainer and all those things. Like, I have been able to learn to laugh at how small I have made myself, and the absurdity, and the people, and then certain people in my life who have made me feel small. I've felt small being around them. I've learned to see how minor and minuscule those moments are, and how they just don't matter, because I am connected to and am much bigger than all of that. And I'm not saying better. I'm saying simply bigger. We are all bigger than we give ourselves credit for. But that, for some reason, that's the medicine that has gotten me back to that kind of thinking and that kind of understanding. Is just the, oh my God, that happened. And I was that upset about that. Really? That's not a big deal. It has given me perspective. That's what I'm trying to say. It has right sized the experiences of life for me. And put things into a lot of perspective. It's also, it's kind of a wild ride, mushrooms. I mean, they are a psychedelic. So for me, I see things and I also hear things. I have auditory hallucinations. I hear things. I hear stories and I hear messages and I hear voices, and it's all really exciting and interesting. What has psilocybin been like for you?
So I've done a lot of psilocybin journeys, and I'm an earthy, solid, grounded person. I have Earth Sun and Earth Moon in my chart, so I'm really grounded, and I think it just anchored me into my work really deeply. And actually, for me, it actually allowed me to project outwardly. I had many, and I wouldn't always call them hallucinations. I have visuals, and sometimes the visuals are vivid and clear, and they are meaningful. And like, I would see things in other people that I couldn't otherwise see. My third eye was clearly open. I was seeing things through my third eye, but I was also having a lot of out of body. I would often leave and visit I think other lives that I have lived and other places on the world. I have had vivid experiences in Tudor England. I have had vivid experiences in Native American cultures. I've had vivid experiences of some sort of desert culture where I literally close my eyes and I'm there, and I open my eyes and I'm back in my backyard on psilocybin. So it's different for everybody. The medicine brings what you need. For me, I think being such a grounded and almost, tightly wound, crystallized, I was very, very fixed as my earthiness, that got me to be a little more expansive and understand that there's air and light and things out there too that I can explore. And so for me, it was a little different than maybe what you had experienced there too. But so I attribute the psilocybin to really tuning up my more intuitive psychic powers. I am not heavily visual in life. I do not see things like many people do, or I have a little bit of auditory, I believe, but it's very minimal. But the psilocybin really opens up that channel and allows me to leave this physical form and be light and air and get out.
you said something that I want to emphasize is that the medicine shows you, I don't know if this was your exact words, but it shows you what you need.
I believe the medicine brings you what you need.
Brings you what you need.
Yeah.
And I can attest to that. And just hearing you talk about this psilocybin helped you go outward. Psilocybin helped me come inward. I have no problem being outward. I have no problem being in front of people, expressing and being out there.
And that's not my thing.
Right. What it needed to show me is how to be inside.
Yeah.
And strengthening and connecting and cultivating that part of me, the inside stuff, because the outside stuff was easy for me. And I mean, if we really want to get into the chart stuff and the, horoscope thing, like I'm a Gemini. And so I'm an air sign. And so I'm all over, I can be all over the place, and I have many thoughts and ideas and I'm outward and expressive and all that stuff. So I love that you said the medicine brings you what you need, and it's not always what you want. I want to be clear on that because I have had my first psilocybin journey. Let me tell you, there was a big part of it that was not what I expected nor what I wanted, but it was what I needed to experience and see. So if there is, in my, again, totally only my experience, but where I am holding on or hiding from something or not looking at something, the medicine will absolutely bring it out for me. It will show me and it will be direct and clear. And I can choose to do what I want with the information. I can hide from it again, or I can face it.
Yeah, it's pretty hard to hide when you're in that state.
It is. Yeah. And in times where I felt resistant to it, it's just, it's persistent.
And it will show you another way.
Yes.
It will deliver some other lesson. Yeah.
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 Yeah. And then let's just talk for a sec about LSD. So the way I have described it, again, totally from my experiences, LSD takes you away and expands me in ways and in ways I can't even imagine. I also microdose with LSD. It, for me, enhances my creativity and the way that I think and how I speak. And LSD is, I think it is the most powerful for me of taking me out of my head into more possibility of what's actually out there, what I can create. I feel like I'm rambling. I don't know. Tell me what you think.
Well, I see LSD as really the connection to the universe through your higher self, through your outward connection, your energetic seventh chakra, the crown chakra is going to be the place where that shoots out, and all your energy is connecting in and coming in and into this, into your brain transceiver from the universe. And LSD accelerates you to the point where you can start to interface with that stuff. Whereas we are really in a low vibration generally on this planet. The physical form we're in keeps us at a low vibration. Our temporal linear experience keeps us at a very low vibration. LSD dissolves all those boundaries and allows your DNA to vibrate at a really, really high level. So you can start to interact at another realm and another place, much higher vibrational level than, don't get me wrong, MDMA does a little bit of that. Psilocybin does some of that, but I think LSD is the next step in that evolution of getting your DNA and this transducer here to really, really vibrate and connect. Because we got to remember, it's all energy. We're energy. We're just stuck in this physical form as energy. And so that DNA, we just get going.
So for those of you who are listening and not watching on YouTube, he was shaking his hands. Can you just, for those of us who might not be clear on what vibration means, like a higher vibrational frequency, could you just maybe define that?
Sure. I'm going to get a little sciencey here.
Okay.
Because at the core, we've discovered through subatomic study, quarks, and the subatomic realm, that everything is energy. Everything vibrates at a core level. It's not matter that we learned back in our Gen X high school or junior high days. They had those, little balls of molecules. That's crap. That's not true. Everything is energy. We are energy. So at the core level, at the very core of our DNA, we're vibrating. And the cool thing about being human, also the negative, is that our perception of the world affects our vibration. If we perceive a negative world, we're going to have a negative vibration. We're going to have a lower vibration. If we perceive a positive world, we're going to have a higher vibration. our perception of our consciousness affects our vibration and affects how we interact in the world. On the collective, it matters on the collective even more, because a group of collective people their vibration will, affect things in a much greater scale. I believe that LSD allows our DNA and our body, our being, as our energy form and fields and whatever define form you want to go to, allows it to vibrate at exceptionally high levels, like another exponentially high level. The DNA opens up and allows us to vibrate at the closer to the universal frequency that's out there. Ever since I started doing this, I can hear a vibration in my head. It never is invasive. It always is comforting. But I believe I'm vibrating higher now than I was 15 years ago because of all my work, and I can hear things at a different level. And I just operate at a different level.
Okay.
All of these things are components of our evolution and are here, I believe, here to help us evolve. Mushrooms are here, psilocybin mushrooms are here to help us evolve. LSD was created in that Swiss lab to help us evolve and create a better way of experiencing the world, more in tune with what we are involved in.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's too deep.
No, it's
okay.
For anyone listening, this is one of the reasons I married this man, because he's so goddamn smart. So, you said all of these things are here or were created to help us evolve. And I interpret that as they help us get out of our own way.
Exactly. Yeah. Evolution is getting out of the way and just being. We're always going to do things. We are humans. We have a need to live. We have to make food and, make our air clean and water and all the things that make us social. We need to do those things. But behind that, we need to always remember that we are not those things. We are just living in this space to experience what we're experiencing in order to evolve.
I think
I was taught something a long time ago before I started most of my group work. There was a guy, what was his name? He just passed away recently. I'll remember his name in a minute. But he said there's only two directions. You're either going toward source or away from source. Dyer. William Dyer. That's his name. Is that right? Yeah.
I don't know.
Anyways,
we'll look.
He was a speaker, a writer, very easy accessible. If people are starting their journey like I was in early 2000s, that was where I started. And he was very easy to understand. And that principle stuck with me through all my work. You're either going towards source or away from source. And source is God, if you want, or universe, or creator, or your supreme being, whatever you define that higher existence as, that's source. And as part of all of this, are going towards source, or we can choose, because we have free will, to go away from source. It's the only two directions.
Yeah.
So my choice always has been, since I learned all this back and I started this 15 years ago or 16 years ago, has been to go towards source as much as I can.
Yeah. Okay.
I know we've been on this a while.
It's okay. No, I think this is a great place for us to stop. Okay. And I would love to do this again, because I don't think that we've even scratched the surface.
No.
But I ultimately, what I hope is that anyone who's listening, who might be curious about either doing this kind of work with psychedelics and plant medicines, or maybe have experienced some of the things that Stephen and I have talked about, might get interested and curious to know what this kind of work could do for them. That's really what this conversation was about. Again, everything we've said today is from our individualized experience and is not meant to be construed as any direction or suggestion or recommendation. And this is what it is. So I want to thank everybody for listening, babe. Thank you so much for doing this with me and with us.
It was a lot of fun.
Absolutely. So I hope that you've enjoyed the episode. You can if anyone out there has any questions about any of this or about my experience, you can always email me at zovig@boldnessablaze.com. But until then, I send you lots of love and big energy. Take good care of yourselves and of each other. And we'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode. Thank you so much.